So if you will pray with me, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this study and for letting us be able to gather together with all of these women and learn about the lineage of Christ. Please help us to learn our best about Rahab and her faith and be able to replicate that faith in our everyday life. Please bless me as I try to teach and help me to communicate what I want to say as well as I can in a way that is pleasing to you. In your son's name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, so today we're going over the Bible story of Rahab. So today we're going over the Bible story of Rahab, and next week we will go over the book. So if there's any questions, if you've been desperate to ask about the book, hold off for another week maybe, so that we can talk about the book next week. Okay. So Rahab. Rahab was a woman of faith. Rahab's story takes place after wandering the desert. So after the Israelites were in the desert for 40 years, after they were freed from Egypt. This was after Moses had died. So after Moses died, God talked to Joshua in Joshua 1, and he said, okay, so now that your 40 years are up, it's time for you to reclaim the land that is here for you, the promised land. So Joshua hears what God tells him, and he goes to the Israelites, and he does a little speech about reclaiming the land that they've been promised. And then Joshua sends out 2 spies to check out the land in the city of Jericho, more specifically. And so Rahab's story begins in Joshua chapter 2. So I'm going to read little snippets, and I'll ask some questions. And hopefully by the end you can get something out of it. So, Joshua 2, we're starting in verse 1. Now Joshua the son of Nun sent out 2 men from Acacia Grove to spy secretly, saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. And they went and came to the house of a harlot named Rahab and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the country. So the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the country. So first of all, I want to ask this question for you guys, and please make comments so that this class can take a little longer in my and I don't run out of teacher. So my first question that I have to ask you guys today to make you think a little bit. First off, so why would somebody want to become a prostitute? Just like in general. Why would someone?
Money.
Yeah. Oftentimes if people become a prostitute, it's because they're down and out. They don't have a job, they need something, they will use what they have as a woman to get the money that they need. Does anyone have any other comments?
Women in that age, they couldn't go out and get a job. They can't. It's not like it is now.
That's
and
true.
If they don't have a husband or sons to take care of them, then they have to find a way to make their living. And oftentimes that was the way they found that.
Karen said back then women specifically had a much harder time finding jobs. It wasn't really a thing for women to just have a job. So if they needed money and they didn't have a husband or something, that was what they had to do. Yes, Karen?
I think also what keeps standing out to me is how little choice women had and what happened to them in their lives back then. They relied on their fathers to determine what their future was going to be.
That's true.
They didn't always make great choices in some cases.
Women didn't have a lot of choice back then. They relied a lot on their father to guide them in life. They didn't have a lot of choices.
And also they had many children, and how are you going to feed your children?
And we don't know, maybe Rahab did have children. We don't know if she did or not.
I was thinking like Sarah, not Sarah. She name just left me. Esther. Oh, yeah. And Sarah and Rebecca also. They were very beautiful women, and the kings like to have beautiful women around. And if you're brought into the king's harem, and then he decides he doesn't want you anymore, then sometimes you're booted out, and you're not good for a whole lot after that. So
Judy's quoting specifically the influencing worker story. She said that, I'm not going to go too much into it because we will talk about the book next week, but said that Rahab was in the king's harem, and then afterwards she had to find something to do to make a living. Okay. So my next question is, so what would we expect a prostitute to do in this situation? Imagine yourself, you are down and out, you need money for whatever reason, you're on the streets or whatever trying to make a living, and some spies come up to you, and it seems like she knew that they were spies. It doesn't specifically say that at first, but she either knew or she found out that they were spies, and she decided to take them in. So what would we expect a prostitute to do? What is our stereotypical assumption of a prostitute in this situation?
To entertain a man.
Yeah, entertain a man.
Try to make money
Maybe
off of
she's
them.
trying to do her job, trying to make money off of the spies. That could be a reason. I was looking through quite a lot of materials to try to figure out how I wanted to teach this class. And some of the material said that part of the reason why some people said that part of the reason why the spies even went into her house to begin with is because she was a prostitute, and maybe they were soliciting her prostitution. I don't think that's the reason, but some people were theorizing that that is why.
And didn't they look a little different?
They might have looked a little different, yeah.
You know, the culture. Or,
Yeah, because the Israelites, especially, I feel like they were pretty recognizable back then, so they probably had to try to disguise themselves or something like that to try to make sure that people didn't know. Clearly, it seemed like everybody did find out pretty quickly that they were spies. So I don't really know if that worked out the way that they had planned.
Also, I think God puts people in places where they.
That's true.
I
God
believe
puts people in
God,
places where they need.
especially during those times.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I think God probably did guide the men to her house, or guided her to the men in whatever way that may have
Laura?
turned out.
I can't hear you very well. Can
Sorry.
you speak a little louder in there?
I can try.
Also, she took some of this money that she made to help her family, correct?
We can assume, but we don't know for
I
sure.
think I read that in there someplace.
I think that was in Francine River's story. We should be really careful with what we assume from the story, because we don't really know if she took that money and used it for her family. We don't know. We can just assume that's probably what most people did in that situation.
We do know that she saved her family.
Yes, we do know that she saved her family.
So she did have a family that she
Yes.
cared about.
Yes, she had a family that she cared about. She decided to save them. Okay. So why would Rahab allow these women into her house, especially if she knew that they were spies? Other than prostitution, can you think of any reason why she might have allowed them to enter her house?
information.
Information?
She was spying on the spies.
Spying on the spies?
So,
Yeah, she might have been. She might have been.
She may have been thinking that maybe she could win favor with them, and that her and her family wouldn't be destroyed then.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Maybe she thought that she was doing something that God would approve of by allowing them in. That's probably what I would have said. I wrote that she believed in God and feared Him, and she wanted to do what was right. She was pretty bold. I feel like we can assume that she was pretty bold.
Probably wanted to hear more about this God that she heard about.
Yeah, because she'd only heard about rumors. I mean, like, they only had rumors, because most of them hadn't actually seen Israelites in action. They've just heard about things that God had actually done with them. Okay, So, why do you think the spies would want to stay with the prostitute? I mentioned the theory that the young spies would have been going to her to solicit services, but is there another reason why maybe the spies would have stayed with the prostitute?
I feel like there was probably going to be some discretion from anyone who was there.
That's true.
So they might have thought that if they were staying there in that home, that anyone else who came through isn't going to be like, oh, guess who I saw hanging out at Rahab's house, because that could implicate them personally, which may not have been a problem then. But I feel like it would give them a little bit more cover, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. There was discretion, is what Aaron said. There was discretion in a house like that. They would think that if somebody else saw them, they probably wouldn't say anything, and they wouldn't say anything about seeing those people there too, which is fair. Any other things anyone can think about? Yes, Kathy?
I'm wondering if it could have been like an inn where people did spend the night.
There is a lot of conjecture or hypothesis that Rahab was an innkeeper. A lot of people say that. It doesn't technically say that in the Bible, but I'm trying to think. I wrote it in my notes. That guy, he was a historian, and he wrote books back then, like in Jesus' time, about the history, and I can't remember. Josephus, yes. So Josephus wrote that the way the Greek was used, I guess back then, that meant that she was an innkeeper. So she could have been an innkeeper. It's a pretty good, I would say, pretty good theory that she was an innkeeper. We don't know for sure. All we know is that she owned a house. But she definitely could have been an innkeeper. And if she was an innkeeper, I think it's pretty fair to assume that they were going there to stay at her inn. A lot of inns also back then also had like a brothel attached. So it was like inn and brothel 2 in 1 kind of.
Who else would have taken her in? That's the question. Maybe they didn't have a whole lot of other choices.
That's true.
Where to stay.
Mm-hmm. They may not have had a lot of options on where they were going to stay, so maybe they went with a prostitute because she was willing to take in anyone. That's true.
Plus, if it were close to the wall, they can get a quick getaway if they need to.
Yeah, it was probably close to the gate, and it was definitely close to the wall. It was in the wall. So they probably thought, well, we could get away quickly if we stay here in the wall. That's smart. I didn't even think about that. Nice. Okay, so I'm going to continue on a little bit. So Joshua 2, we're starting in verse 4. Then the woman took the 2 men and hid them. So she said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And it happened as the gate was being shut, when it was dark, that the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them with stalks of flax which she had laid in order on the roof. Then the men pursued them by the road to the Jordan to the fords, and as soon as those who pursued them had gone out, they shut the gate. So Rahab straight up lied to the king. How do we feel about that? What was she risking by lying to the king? Do you think this was a safe move on her part?
She was risking her life and her family's life for sure.
Yeah, she was risking her life and she was risking her family's life. It's true. Any other things she might have been risking? Okay. So, I have to ask as well, I think this can apply to us today. How does faith in the face of risk apply to us today? Because God says that we should have faith even when things are not looking right for us. Even when the risk is embarrassment, our dignity, rejection, we should still have faith that things will follow through. We should still have the willingness to risk our image to do what is right. Don't you think that applies to us today? I would say so. Okay. So do you think that she was justified for lying? Isn't lying a sin? Do you think it was fine that she did that? I'm seeing some nodding, some yeses.
I mean, lying is a sin, but so is murder, and I think it's probably fair to assume that the spies would have been killed by the king. And if Rahab had allowed them to be turned over, my thought would be, to use like our current terms, that she would be an accessory to murder. And I think I would rather lie than be responsible for someone's death. I know that like all sin is equal in God's eyes, but I do think that he would be okay with lying to save someone's life when the alternative is like they're definitely going to.
Okay, lying to save someone's life is probably okay if we think someone's going to be killed.
That may be, people may disagree with that. That's okay. I feel very strongly about that though.
I don't think I would disagree with that. I think that's probably true. I think this is a weird kind of situation where it's sort of like, okay, well, what would you rather do? And I think I probably would rather lie in this situation as well. I don't think, yes, Karen?
There's a phrase that comes to my mind. It's all is fair in love and war.
All is fair in love and war.
I believe that God was using her, and that,
Yeah.
I mean, he was sending, them home to annihilate this place. So, I think it was okay.
Yeah, I think so. I do think it's kind of a weird situation. I think I read a lot. I think there's quite a lot actually of controversy over whether she was right for lying. There's a lot of people who say that she wasn't, and there's a lot of people that said that it's kind of just one of those things that you sort of have to do sometimes in situations like that, and you sort of just have to say, well, God will forgive me. God will forgive me for lying. Because she didn't just lie in general. She lied specifically to save the spies that she was trying to save. And we know that she believed in God. So she probably knew what she was doing. But she decided that whatever she did was worth it to, like Aaron said, not kill them. Yes.
Another thing is that I'm a strong believer that if you pray to God and ask Him for guidance and direction, He will give it to you. We don't always know how He's doing that or how He's working in our lives. And He might have brought the spies to her because He knew her heart would be open to protecting them.
Mm-hmm.
So that could have all been God-driven.
Yeah, I think I would definitely say that it was God-driven. I mean, we know Rahab is part of Christ's lineage, so God definitely had a hand in, she was in His plan, like directly in His plan. So I think that He probably did lead her to make those decisions, lie to the king, whatever it was. He probably led her to make those choices. Kim?
Well, I think there are sometimes too that I've read in the Old Testament where a prophet would tell somebody something that was wrong. I mean, and it was in God's plan for them to do that because He was testing this other person. I'm recalling a story where the prophet is not supposed to go to inside anybody's house or eat or drink anything. And he's sitting under a tree, this prophet, and another prophet comes to him and says, "Oh, I was told you are supposed to come in and come to my house." And he thinks that that's what he's supposed to do, but he's being tested. And when he goes and he does that, then he's killed because
Interesting. Yeah.
he didn't follow God's rule for him. And he was being tested. I mean, that's just one that comes to mind where God planned for somebody to lie.
He planned for someone to lie, yeah.
Just to test him.
Yeah, that is true. Sometimes God can even plan our sins. You know,
to test.
As a test. Bonnie?
Not to jump ahead with the story here, but
no, you're fine.
In a minute she talks about all the things that the Jerichoites Jerichoians, whatever they're called, they had seen the Israelites, all the things that had happened to them. The Red Sea had parted. She's talking about all the things that they had known had happened. So I think she realizes that the Israelites are something to be reckoned with, and their God is powerful. So I think she wants to be on their side. So I think at this point she's going to do anything to protect that thing because she thinks that's the thing that's going to save her.
Yeah, I think that's true. Someone in the back had a comment as well. Peggy?
I was basically going to say the same thing, but she told the spies, we're all fearful because we've seen your God do these amazing things. Our whole city's in fear of you all. And she actually says, your God is God. Mm-hmm. And so she realizes it because of the successes that they've had with taking land and opening the Red Sea. She heard about that. And so she's just convinced of it. So that's the start of her faith, was hearing of it, being fearful of it, but then kind of being in awe also. And then when she had a chance to help, I think it gave her the strength to do it, even though it was scary, because she knew she had heard about these amazing, awesome things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
And I think also, along with that she had no idols in her dwelling. And other people, that was very commonplace. And so she already knew that idol worship was not right with God.
Yeah, we know that she believed in God and that she was going to do what was right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is some good discussion, guys. I didn't even think about some of the stuff that you guys are saying. Didn't even think about it. Okay, so I also have to ask, the spies were risking something as well, weren't they? By going in to be with the prostitute, to go to her inn, or to be at her home. What were the spies risking? Olivia?
She could have easily turned them in.
She could have turned them in?
As a prostitute, she didn't have many options, and if that was a way for her to get up and save her family and do something to protect them, that would be a way to do it. But instead, she chose not to and to do the right thing.
She maybe could have even gotten some money for turning them in, but she decided not to because she wanted to do what was right. Yeah, I think that's true.
Well, their reputation as well. Maybe when they go back to camp, people are going to be like, you stayed at a prostitute's house? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So.
That's true. That's true. I also think, she could have turned them in, but, when she told them later on in the story, she told them to go to the mountains. Maybe she told the king's men that, too. Go to the mountains. I told them to go there. That's where they'll be. She could have led them straight to their demise, but they trusted that God was going to have a hand in their situation with her, so they trusted that whatever it was that she was saying, that she was on their side. I think partly why they believe that she was on her side, too, is because of this little speech that she goes through, which I'm about to read here. So, Joshua 2, verse 8. Now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Now therefore, I beg you, swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you also will show kindness to my father's house, and give me a true token, and spare my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. So the man answered her, Our lives for yours, if none of you tell this business of ours. And it shall be, when the Lord has given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with you. So there clearly was rumors about the Israelites. People were scared, like seriously scared. Why did Rahab believe in God? Everyone else in Jericho didn't. I mean, they may have believed in God, but it was more like fear. So why was Rahab different?
Well, I think some of hers was fear. She had seen the results of how God was with the Israelites. He had a lot of power, and he enabled them to take over countries and lands and win all the battles.
Yeah.
She wanted to be on the winning side.
She was afraid, so she wanted to be on the winning side.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah. That's
true. Believe.
I was going to say a lot of people, when they're going through difficult times, will turn to God out of desperation. Mm-hmm. And so she was probably more likely in her very difficult walk or journey on this earth to look to God for help in helping her family, and despite her occupation.
Yes.
But she did have a belief in God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found it interesting that she bargained. She bargained that, hey, if I do this, you must vow to me to keep my family safe.
Yeah.
And
I wonder
good for her.
If maybe she was just used to bargaining. Maybe that's
true.
just what she's always done. So, because I mean, she was a prostitute from what we know. So, maybe she always bargained. Maybe bargaining was just part of what she knew how to do. And clearly it worked. Because clearly it worked out for her in the end. But even now, like, even if she believed in God, she didn't actually know that this was going to work out. Like, she was taking a huge risk here. Like, yeah, she was taking a huge risk. Yes.
You know, I think she'd heard about all the things that had happened, like the Red Sea and different things. And she knew that it took a lot of power to do that. And she believed that there was a God who could do that. Whereas those idols, clay idols, she didn't think they could do that. Mm-hmm. And so she feared for herself and her family, because she thought, okay, they're coming and we're all going to be dead. And she wanted to be part of God's family. I mean, she wanted to know how to do that.
Mm-hmm. Idols never did anything. Yeah, God is what He makes action. So I wrote here that I thought it was really fascinating that, especially from the way Francine Rivers portrayed it. I know we're not really talking about the book, but it does help to have that perspective. I think it's really fascinating that sometimes we forget that everyone heard about the Red Sea. Like, we're reading about it in the Bible, but everyone, like, far and wide, heard about the Red Sea, and whether they believed it or not, it was like a huge story. Like, everyone was talking about it. And they were, like, really scared. I mean, like, if you heard something like that, nowadays, I mean, it would be on social media in, like, 2 seconds, but, like, wouldn't you be like, whoa, like, everyone's talking about this, like Tiger King or something. Like, you hear about Tiger King, and then everyone's talking about it. Like, the Red Sea, like, you hear that the Egyptians had these Hebrews, and then all of a sudden, all this weird stuff happens to the Hebrews, and all these, like, weird plagues and things are happening to them. Like, I'm sure everyone heard about that. And then afterwards, after they finally get all these, like, slaves out, which I feel like is totally unheard of, like, that would have even happened to begin with. Then, like, the whole Red Sea gets parted. Like, that's not just, like, a little lake. Like they said that they crossed the Jordan. So, like, okay, yeah, they parted the Jordan. That's cool. But, like, they parted the Red Sea? Like, that's crazy. Everybody heard about that. And they were scared. And the parting of the Red Sea, I want to remind you guys, this happened 40 years ago at this point. Like, this wasn't just, like, a few weeks ago or a few months ago. 40 years ago, they parted the Red Sea. And they're still talking about it. Like, yeah, Bonnie?
I was just thinking as you were talking about this, in my mind, when I've read the Bible over the years, the Jericho people always stayed in Jericho, and the Egyptians always stayed in Egypt. And but it really wasn't like that. People traveled. Like, we know what's happening on the other side of the world from us. I mean, we have, way better ways of finding that out now. But they traveled. They heard stories. But as you were talking about that, I was thinking they had heard all that. They had, because people traveled and went and got things, and I just really had never thought about people, leaving their city, which is really stupid, but
No, I totally know what you
yeah,
mean.
but that's
People
a kind of a good
people
thought.
talk. Yeah, and that was really the only way they got communicating back then. So I'm sure gossip was super common back then. Everyone talked about everything. So they went, and when they traveled, they were like, "Hey, tell me stories about this land that you came from." They're like, "Well, let me tell you about this parting of the Red Sea that my friend's friend saw." Because that's so crazy that happened. So even 40 years ago, people are still talking about the Red Sea parting. And she probably, we don't even know how old she was, but she might not have even been born when that happened. And she's still hearing about it. And not only did she hear about it, but she believed that it happened. And that God was the one doing that. Which I think is really incredible. We read the Bible, and even some of us still don't believe. People still read the Bible and they don't believe. But if the parting of the Red Sea happened before she was even born, and she believed just based off rumors, how much more can we do today? Kim?
I was going to say, this reminds me of the story of the flood, and that in every part of the world, there is a flood story.
Yeah. Yeah, the story of the flood is huge. Tons of different religions believe that the flood actually happened. There's flood stories from all over the world, like Kim said. Yeah, that's so true. We know today that just belief is not enough. God calls for action. In James 2, verse 25, I'm not going to read it, but the context for that is it's about the faith without works is dead. In James. So he commends Rahab for receiving the spies and delivering them from the king and letting them down the wall. She, even years and years and years, hundreds of years after she did this, people are impressed that a mere prostitute believed in God and saved the spies. I think that's really incredible. That so much longer, we're still hearing about her, and they still talked about how the works that she did in her faith were amazing. Because God requires action. Faith without works is dead. There is no faith without works. Okay, I'm going to read the rest of Joshua 2 real quick. The rest of Joshua 2. Okay. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall. She dwelt on the wall. And she said to them, "Get to the mountains, lest the pursuers meet you. Hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Afterward, you may go your way." So the men said to her, "We will be blameless of this oath of yours, which you have made us swear, unless when we come into the land, you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window, through which you let us down, and unless you bring your father, your mother, your brothers, and all your father's household to your home. So it shall be that whoever goes outside the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his head, and he will be guiltless. And whoever is with you in this house, his blood shall be on our head if a hand is laid on him. And if you tell this business of ours, then we will be free from your oath which you made us swear." Then she said, "According to your words, so be it." And she sent them away, and they departed. And she bound the scarlet cord in the window. They departed and went to the mountain and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers returned. The pursuers sought them all along the way, but did not find them. So the 2 men returned, descended from the mountain, and crossed over. And they came to Joshua, the son of Nun, and told him all that had befallen them. And they said to Joshua, "Truly the Lord has delivered all the land into our hands, for indeed all the inhabitants of the country are faint-hearted because of us." So Rahab was really smart. She wasn't just your average gal, especially for what we think of as a prostitute. I think I have a stereotype in my head, at least, that I'm not saying this is true at all, but it's just when I think of a stereotype, I don't necessarily think of someone who's really smart, someone who could get a PhD or something like that, because why else would they be doing prostitution? So there's some things that we know about Rahab. We know that she was a prostitute. We know that she owned a house and/or inn, if you want to believe the writings of Josephus or not. We know that she had a family, she had parents, and she had siblings. I feel like that's really uncommon for a prostitute, especially since I think it was Hazel was saying that like it was men that they relied on back then. So if she had a family, why was she prostituting herself? We don't really know. But we do know that she had a family. She had parents. She had siblings. She had her father's household. We know that she heard the rumors about God and about the children of God and that she believed. And we know that she risked her life to help an enemy of her people, which was not common back then. I mean, none of the other Jerichoans risked their life to help the spies. Like, none of them were risking their life, even though they all heard, because she said that they all heard about God. Even though they all heard about him and parting of the Red Sea, they didn't want to risk their lives to try to. Maybe they just thought he was one of many gods, because they had a lot back then. So that could have been it. So let's sum up what we discussed today. So I want to say Rahab is an example of faith. I don't know if we're supposed to write the things on our folder, but if we are, then we can do that right now. We can write faith and unashamed on the front of our folder, because unashamed is the title of our chapter. Faith and unashamed. So Rahab was specifically an example of faith in action because God requires action in our walk with faith. She reminds us not to make assumptions about people when we don't know. She showed a great level of faith in what she was willing to risk her life for a possibility of saving herself and her family that may never have happened. Her faith was based upon hearing the rumors of incredible works of God saving the nation of Israel. And I think that parallels in our lives today. So we should ask ourselves, do we have the kind of faith that Rahab had? Do we hear about the rumors of God and do we believe in the things that he said? Do we read the Bible and actually believe, even though we don't see it with our own two eyes? When we hear the stories of his works, do we believe? When you hear that Jesus died for our sins, do you believe? Like Rahab, are you willing to act on your faith? Rahab shows that regardless of who you are or what you have done, God will always honor your faith.